A flash split through the void, followed by two more. A lone figure tumbled in this endless space, light trailing behind him. This realm without end, teeming with celestial beasts and hidden horrors, was known as the Abyss. From behind surged a terrifying creature, a massive hydra-like entity with gaping jaws. The figure, still falling, collided directly with this monster, the infamous seven-headed fierce dragon, a being saturated with destructive power. The dragon let out a wrathful roar, preparing to strike, but the man twisted mid-air, arms folding, into a diver's stance before he launched his assault. He unleashed a series of high-speed strikes, fists crashing down like meteors. The battle soared across the skies. Just then, a new threat emerged. A colossal bear-shaped being known as Vulcan, devourer of worlds, drew near. The man raised his arms, ready for another clash. He faced both monsters, rulers of their domains in the abyss. As the sky trembled, another creature slipped into the fray. Spindly, skeletal limbs, dark as shadow. Org, an ancient predator. Threads of red magic tangled around Vulcan and Org, binding them. Though it was rare to see them together, a third presence invaded, a towering arachnid, monarch of the spatial cavern. It snapped its fangs, hissing. The man's eyes sparked with grim resolve. Lowering his hands, he thought to himself, it felt like centuries had passed. Gazing into the depths, he knew he had to fight them one by one. The bodies of the monsters lay behind him, felled. But the cost had been time, too much of it. He turned his attention toward a distant glimmer. A system message appeared. He had attained a recognition, a grand one. He was now acknowledged as the invincible training master. The world itself pulsed in response. His form had become more distinct, more real. He lifted his gaze toward the heavens as the system confirmed it. He now surpassed even constellations. One day, Earth was pierced by a portal from the abyss. Myths were no longer fiction. Celestial entities, winged, radiant beings known as constellations, emerged. These entities, treated as gods, granted blessings and sought followers. The more worshippers they had, the stronger they became. Their glowing eyes were signs of swelling power. Earth, brimming with nearly 10 billion souls, was a beacon. And so the battle began. Many constellations came bearing gifts. Others brought war. Then came one more, a constellation, once a man, whose power rivaled the heavens. He drew breath, steadying himself. His name was Kai. He narrowed his eyes in focus. With a calm hand, he picked up a frying pan and dropped in a thick slab of meat. A man such as this bore the weighty title of Invincible Training Master. As the pan sizzled, a curious voice asked what kind of cookware he used. Kai smiled and replied, "It was forged from adamantine." The goblin nearby gawked in disbelief. Could such a pan truly cook the flesh of a planet-eating bear? Even constellations hesitated at that thought. The goblin squinted, pointing at the shimmering oil coating the meat. What was this ingredient? He was no mere goblin, but Max, Archmage of Ephesus, king of goblins and devout follower of the Invincible, Master. Kai gently tapped the meat, recalling the milk once granted by a cow-like constellation. He had traded release for milk, all to satisfy his hunger. With a quiet sigh, he confessed, he had longed for real food back then. Max was stunned. He had traded blows with a celestial being just for ingredients. Kai chuckled at the memory. His true obsession wasn't battle, but cooking. That had been his only escape during eons trapped in the abyss. He drew out a gleaming blade, a rare orichalcum kitchen tool that kept ingredients pristine. He explained, this meat was too precious. It was his first real meal in over 300 years. He deserved a feast. Max trembled with realization. His master had fought a divine being not for conquest, but for culinary delight. Kai took a bite, savoring the perfect sear. Max stood frozen. Such generosity was unheard of among constellations. When Kai offered a piece, Max hesitated, overwhelmed, yet full of gratitude. The goblin took a forkful and placed it in his mouth. Instantly, radiant light burst from his eyes and lips. The system chimed in. He had consumed steak from a celestial beast. Flames flared in his palms. The system continued. Adamantines. Unique properties had preserved the umami within the meat, enhanced by magic. Waves of power surged from Max. The oil used, a gift from a mystical constellation, amplified the meat to a divine level. The spell circle beneath Max expanded, unlocking a fresh mana circuit. He nearly collapsed in delight, laughing like a madman. He named the dish the greatest he had ever tasted. Kai blinked, stepping away. He couldn't understand the goblin's kind. Their reactions always baffled him. He sat back, settling on a jagged rock, eyes drifting upward. The stars shone brightly overhead, he murmured. He missed Earth. Elsewhere on Earth, someone grunted beneath a barbell. The past, murky and distant, revealed a time long before Kai was revered. There, struggling under heavy weight, a young Kai trained. When asked why, he had only one answer. He wanted to become stronger. A nearby teacher, unimpressed, placed a textbook on his hip, saying this was a Korean lesson, not a gym. Another told the teacher to give up on the boy, like the others had. Kai back then had been ordinary, a human, a student, before he became something more, before he became the invincible training master. Kai trained endlessly in his room, relentlessly lifting weights. From a young age, he was consumed by the idea of becoming stronger. On the wall above him hung a weathered skull, a grim reminder of his past. As an orphan with no one to lean on, he had long ago decided that strength was his only protection. He heaved the barbell into the air again, sweat trickling down his face, his muscles burning. Training day in and day out, he pushed himself beyond human limits. Taking a brief pause, Kai lowered the bar and let it rest on his chest. Back then, he was ranked C+ as a hunter, one of many who took up arms against the threats spilling from the abyss. Hunters were regarded as modern warriors, noble figures who fought monsters and raided dungeons to protect humanity. There was glory in the work, and riches too. Monster cores, rare items, and powerful relics from the depths tempted many. Kai had nothing tying him down. With no family and no fears left to conquer, becoming a hunter had felt like the only choice. Sitting, nearby on a creaky chair, Bill observed the young man with concern. "Hey, maybe you should chill a bit," he said, watching Kai's drenched figure. He was breathing heavily, not from exhaustion, but from sheer intensity. Bill frowned. "You're really thinking of charging into a B-rank dungeon? We're barely surviving C ranks." Tilting his head, Bill continued, "Even the lower-tier dungeons are brutal. People die in there. And B ranks? They chew hunters. Up." His voice dropped. "Artifacts, martial arts, magic, it's all great. But none of it matters if your body breaks first. We're only human." Kai stared blankly at the floor, his silence weighty. Bill sighed, rubbing his face. "You can't just keep diving headfirst into hell. What's driving you? You don't care if you die? Don't you have a girlfriend? Or someone waiting?" Kai opened his inventory, then quietly said, "We broke up." Bill blinked, stunned. "Really? That's a shame. What happened?" Kai stretched his arms, trying to brush it off. "I told her I didn't have time for dates. I was focused on training. She told me to go date a monster instead. That was that," Bill groaned, dragging his hand down his face. "You're hopeless, man." Suddenly, the ground shook violently. A monstrous presence was approaching, one so massive it felt like the very air was cracking. The other hunters shouted warnings, but Kai remained calm, turning to face the beast. With a composed breath, he slipped into his stance and launched forward. His punch collided with the monster's chest, sending a shockwave outward as the fierce battle unfolded. Nearby hunters whispered among themselves. Martial artists like him, tough guys, yeah, good for tanking. But when it comes to real damage, mages win every time. Kai ducked, then landed a blow to the monster's jaw. One hunter asked, "Why'd he even choose fist fighting?" Another replied, "We found a martial arts scroll in a dungeon. No one cared. Everyone's after magic these days." But Kai, he picked it up and started training like crazy. Kai stood over the fallen monster. Whatever others said didn't matter. He had no regrets. Martial arts wasn't flashy or easy, but every inch of strength it gave was earned, not gifted. He raised his leg in a swift arc, then lunged forward, again, burning with the urge to improve. Later, deep into the night, Kai checked the time and sighed. Still not enough. He sat in the corner of his room, body trembling with fatigue. He'd clawed his way to C+ through pure discipline, but there were still others ahead of him. Leaning back against the wall, he closed his eyes, yet even in sleep, his body trained, moving through strikes and forms. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the darkness. "Even now, you're training?" Kai lashed out in a reflexive knee strike. A humanoid figure emerged, cloaked in radiant light. "Are you awake? Or just dreaming?" the stranger asked. Kai shook his head. "Doesn't matter. If it helps, I'll call it spiritual training." Light fell across half his face as he turned to the voice. A being stood before him, tall, long-haired, eyes hidden beneath bandages. The entity addressed him respectfully. "Mr. Kai." Kai squinted. "Who are you?" "I am Themis," she replied softly. "The virtuous goddess of the scales. A constellation of the abyss." He shielded his eyes from her glow, his body tense. "I'd like to make you an offer," she said. He blinked in confusion. "All right," he answered, far too quickly. Themis tilted her head, surprised. "No questions?" "Just one," Kai replied. "Will I become stronger if I accept?" A smile curled across her lips. "Yes," she said, hand brushing her face. "That's what I'm offering." Kai gave her a sincere nod. "That's all I need to hear." Suddenly, the air lit up around them in a warm, glowing storm. Kai looked upward and asked, "Why me? There are hunters out there stronger, more famous." Themis raised her hand, gathering the light into her palm. "I already told you who I am," she said. "As the goddess of the scales, I see all possibilities, including the future." Her hand dimmed, then released a storm of light. Within it appeared terrifying visions, monsters of immense size devouring Earth. "An apocalypse is coming," she said, "and it will be unlike anything the world has seen. Creatures like Org and others, dark constellations, would come not to test Earth, but to destroy it." She painted a future where humanity's current struggles would seem like nothing. Beneath her, the image of a burning red planet spun into view. "You," she said, "are the key to stopping this future." Kai stared, breath caught. The goddess drifted closer. "With me, you'll grow stronger. I'll make sure of it." Kai's eyes widened, his mouth slightly open. For the first time in a long while, something beyond training filled his vision, a path forward, guided by the divine. When the virtuous goddess of scales softly warned him that the road ahead would be paved with relentless, punishing, and almost inhuman training, she did so with a shaky smile. Beneath that calm exterior, however, she was quietly terrified. Her anxiety only grew with each passing moment. She had never imagined that someone would actually accept such a harsh, one-sided deal so readily. A nervous chill swept down her spine as she realized she was dealing with someone far beyond normal reasoning. With a subtle motion, she stretched out her arms as if to embrace the weight of her own words, her voice gaining clarity as she elaborated. Through this arduous training, Kai would eventually become her chosen avatar. She gently pressed her fingers together in a solemn gesture. Kai, watching her with growing curiosity, didn't know what to make of her trembling lips and hesitant offer. Even though she extended her hand to seal the pact, doubt flickered in her eyes. This sort of proposal had no precedent. It was unbalanced, unfair, and entirely irrational. Kai grumbled about the overwhelming burst of light that had accompanied her earlier appearance, shielding his face with his hand. Becoming the avatar of a constellation was no simple feat. It meant surrendering parts of your soul, binding it to a celestial entity, and living within its invisible constraints for eternity. Still, the glowing orb in her hand shimmered with undeniable promise, and Themis offered it to him, promising extraordinary strength and powerful magic. Without delay, she reiterated her proposal, urging him to become her avatar and accept the bond. She explained that, just as multiple constellations might compete for a single human vessel, there were limited opportunities to claim one, and many of the other constellations were far less patient or kind. They locked eyes in quiet acknowledgement of this widely known truth among hunters. Kai's face lit up with interest as he asked, almost eagerly, what sort of training she meant. He wasn't exactly a renowned hunter, and no one had ever fought over him after all. Themis summoned a massive golden scale behind her and revealed that she had created a dedicated training domain for him within the abyss itself. She added, almost as an afterthought, that time flowed differently there. A few days on Earth might feel like centuries inside. Kai's jaw slackened in disbelief as she continued, explaining that he'd have to endure this training in complete isolation, potentially for dozens or even hundreds of years. She calmly informed him that once the training began, he wouldn't be allowed to back out or return until it was complete. The color drained from Kai's face. A shiver went through him. This is just like that one room in Dragon Ball, he muttered, half laughing, half panicking. When she tilted her head, not understanding the reference, he clenched his fist and told himself this was all for the best. After all, hadn't countless famous hunters become powerful after forming bonds with constellations? But deep down, he sensed something was off. Still, he forced a smile and convinced himself that this level of suffering must be standard. Other avatars must have endured it too. But the truth was, most of them had grown strong before forming. Their contracts. Themis unfolded her arms slowly and admitted that she knew she was demanding the impossible. What she was asking wasn't just difficult, it was cruel. But before she could even give him time to think, Kai nodded with quiet determination. She blinked in surprise. She had been planning to grant him a full week to decide. The goddess grew uneasy. "Are you absolutely certain?" she asked. "You don't want more time to consider?" Kai met her gaze without flinching. "There's nothing for me to reconsider. I don't have anything tying me to this world. All I ask is to leave behind a letter." His voice was steady, not because he had thought it through, but because his desire to grow stronger outweighed every doubt. And if becoming powerful would help save the world, then that was a bonus. Themis lowered her arms, visibly stunned by his sincerity. Silence hung in the air until Kai called out to her again. The goddess dabbed her eyes with a small handkerchief, her emotions catching up with her. She confessed in a fragile voice that she had once been afraid the humans of Earth were too selfish, too consumed by greed. But Kai had proven her prophecy right for once. Kai instinctively shielded himself from the surrounding light as the goddess created a portal above them. Something fractured in the air, breaking apart like shattered glass. He stared in disbelief, his body frozen as she reminded him to focus, only on the letter he wished to leave behind. She would take care of delivering it. He stepped toward the swirling vortex. The portal pulled gently at his fingers first, then the rest of his body. Within seconds, he vanished into the churning light, leaving only a fading crack in the sky. His room stood empty, save for a letter that appeared beside the barbell he had once trained with. A name and address were scribbled neatly in the corner. Lightning danced across the sky. A furious storm gathered outside, and from its center, Kai emerged once more, this time coughing from the force of the wind. He opened one eye and quickly sensed that the magical energy in this place was leagues beyond anything he had felt before. As he surveyed the floating land masses of the abyss, it dawned on him. This place was eerily similar to a dungeon. Back on Earth, scientists had speculated that dungeons were fragments broken off from the abyss itself. He gazed up at the star-scattered void above, took in the silence, and realized there was nothing here. No landmarks, no companions, no distractions. And this emptiness was his training ground. Looking down at his fists, he cracked his knuckles and whispered to himself, "Let's begin." He launched into motion, striking the air with powerful rhythmic precision, his breath syncing with every punch and kick. Meanwhile, Themis floated among her angelic attendants, her wings glowing faintly. "I interrupted the vision just in time," she murmured. Her followers hesitated, unsure whether to speak. She continued, more to herself than to them. "He'll make a remarkable avatar, if I guide him properly." Despite her divine foresight, she admitted her abilities weren't perfect. She could only glimpse fragments of the future, some real, some mere conjecture, but she had seen enough. She had witnessed Kai pushing himself in the abyss, fighting to suppress the coming evil. Constellations. Holding up two fingers in front of her, she smiled. Turning him into a formidable warrior who pledged loyalty to her would be worth any cost. She vanished, lost in her thoughts. Her attendants grew more uneasy. Confidence in a goddess didn't come easily when she looked so anxious. Still, they understood that all they could do now was wait and hope. Another cyclone spun in the distance, howling across the barren land behind Kai. Themis had made all necessary preparations. As the wind roared closer, she hoped the trial would not be too overwhelming. She had even made sure the boy had distractions, small things to keep him from losing himself, and most importantly, a sanctuary if he needed rest. Kai turned his head slowly. The tornado wasn't just weather. It was the beginning of his test. He took one long breath, steadied his stance, and readied his fists. A grin tugged at the corners of his mouth. Of course, he thought, there's no growth without danger. And if this was the goddess's way of pushing him forward, then it meant there was purpose behind the chaos. The whirlwind slammed into the earth with deafening force, and Kai let out a cry of disbelief. Could this truly be part of the goddess's trial? As the fierce winds howled around him, tearing at his skin and pulling at his limbs like unseen hands, he squeezed his eyes shut. It felt as though every fiber of his body was being ripped apart. Pain surged through him like fire in his veins, but even amidst the agony, Kai grit his teeth and forced his eyes open just a little. He knew he couldn't afford to break now, not here, not this early. If this was his test, then he had to face it head on. The wind caught him and lifted his body into the air like a leaf in a storm. As he spun inside the chaos, he shouted a line he'd once read, perhaps half in jest, perhaps half in desperation. Only by walking through pain and hardship can one become truly strong. That's what it means to carry the will of the divine. Thunder cracked through the sky like a whip. From within the heart of the cyclone, something fractured. An invisible shell broke apart. Shards of a shimmering illusion splintered and tumbled downward, unveiling a hidden light behind them. A radiant pillar of energy pierced the heavens, rising like a holy monument. The illusion magic, carefully laid over the region by the virtuous goddess of liberation as a protective veil, had been dispelled by the sheer power of the storm. Before Kai could comprehend what was happening, the gale returned with twice the fury. The magical storm reasserted itself, wild and unpredictable. Even the goddess herself, a being who could perceive fragments of the future, stood baffled, her brows knitted together in genuine confusion. She had not seen this outcome in any of her visions. Her celestial attendants glanced among themselves, equally alarmed. Why hadn't the boy reached the tower yet? Themis stepped closer to the edge of her viewing platform, concern etched into her usually serene features. I left him merely 10 meters from the Citadel's gate. Surely he would have found it by now, she muttered under her breath. Her voice trailed off, then hardened with frustration. Why are Earthlings so incapable of following simple instructions? She looked to the meticulously prepared training site within the Citadel. There were racks of enchanted dumbbells, crates of the finest sports nutrition available even in the heavens, and a variety of cutting-edge exercise gear, all summoned and blessed for Kai's use. Themis had even added a few personal touches. A console for entertainment and a peculiar cat toy, just in case the boy grew lonely or bored. It wasn't just training. It was a sanctuary she had built for him, a place of growth and peace amidst the madness.